Welcome to the Iron Prescription podcast with your hosts, Drs. Lynette and Stuart. We're both GPs and we're both personal trainers, though we do both jobs in very different ways. We chat about the best things you can do for your health and fitness, and along the way, help you to avoid wasting time on the things that really aren't. Thanks for listening. Exercise and mental health is rather broad.
Yeah, it's a huge subject, isn't it?
And in my mind, it kind of falls into three areas. You've got, the impact of exercise on mood, which is fairly quick to see and to feel in the moment and then in the hours afterwards. You've got the more kind of medium term benefits of having an exercise routine. And then you've got the long term impact of exercise in terms of longevity and dementia prevention. And so potentially there's more than one conversation's worth of material to talk about in terms of exercise and mental health. But what are your thoughts about where we should land with it?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is about mental health is, first of all, it's undeniably linked to what you do from an exercise perspective. There was a huge study done where they took 97 reviews, 1,000, I've written these down, 1,039 trials, and they had 128,000 participants.
That's pretty big.
So this is not little stuff. This is massive. We talk about a trial being significant if it has a couple of thousand people in it, but this is obviously clearly huge. And if you do exercise for 10 to 12 weeks at 3 to 5 times per week for 30 to 40 minutes in that regime, depending on which paper you look at, but they're the sort of areas that are, of spread of how much effort you need to put into it. There's a significant reduction in depression in all age groups from the age of 16 to 85.
Okay. And
in fact, 1.5 times more than the use of counselling or medication.
Okay. So that in itself is plenty of material to talk about, isn't it? Because we treat people for depression in one job and not an insignificant number of people, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And accusations get hurled towards us as doctors, and I certainly always feel this, that all we want to do is dish out pills.
Yeah.
And it always pisses me off.
Yeah.
So I always feel the need to get defensive about that because it's complicated, and ultimately the model that we work in affords us 10 minutes, doesn't it, to spend with people. Yeah. And within that, there are some people that want those pills. There's no denying it.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you know those statistics and that data and you've seen the benefit, it makes it less satisfying to hand over a prescription by far, but sometimes you still have to do it. But so I think there's this kind of common belief certainly in the internet world and maybe even in the public chatter that, there's no point going to see the doctor, they'll just dish you out pills.
But the reality is as well, I mean, I also find that people need to take ownership for this as well, because what they want is a pill.
Yeah.
They want a quick fix. They want me to, first of all, I find in medicine, people want me to validate how bad they feel or how much pain they're in or how much concern they have about something. They want me to validate that their time that they've taken to come and see me and my time, and they want me to say, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You have whatever your Google search has given you.
Yeah.
And then they want justification. A lot of people, depending on where you work, a lot of people want me to take responsibility for their illness. They don't want me to take responsibility for them per se, but they want me to take responsibility for their illness. They're handing over their illness to me as a medical practitioner, and I have to do something back in return. The sad part is that I hate giving out drugs because I know the side effects that it comes with and the downside to medication. And also, it's not teaching your body anything. It's giving your body something.
And I think I was saying this to a patient actually just last week, in that the longer you do the job, the more you realise how mediocre most of this stuff is that we give out. And I don't necessarily know that you appreciate that in your first 4 or 5 years doing the job, because,
No.
you're still relatively fresh out of training. You just haven't seen enough people over a long enough period of time, particularly in general practice when we see the same people coming back year on year, to be able to see that it's made a significant difference. Now, that's not to say there aren't some people that aren't helped, but I think, that they're often people that are already doing the basics quite well. And I come back to this thing quite often, whether somebody asks me a question about food or exercise or sleep. There are certain things that we know work really well for your health,
Mm.
exercise being a massive piece of that puzzle. And some people are doing the basics quite well, again, depending on where you work and what particular section of the population you're seeing. And they've done everything. Well, they're doing it as
Mm.
well as they can within the
Yeah.
framework of what they've got. And there are instances when people can then take a medication and it can make that little bit extra difference to get them back to work or get through a difficult period. And I think they're the subtle distinctions that you sometimes don't have time to go into to explain to somebody unless you're seeing them several times. So I'm never totally against it, but it's always that caveat of, okay, let's look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
How well have you got the basics in place? What could you be doing for yourself? And then what could help you put a foot on the ladder? I think it was a podcast I was listening to with a psychotherapist, and she
Yeah.
likened it to medication being the scaffolding around a building and therapy being the foundations in order to truly stabilize the building, so to speak. And I quite like that.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, but there's a bit more going on in the foundations than just the
Yeah.
therapy, and therapy can go on for a very long time.
Yeah. I think, therapy is, there is definitely a place for medication and for medical treatment in mental health. And it may be that you need to treat the person to support the person, but treating the person doesn't necessarily lead to a cure.
Mm.
You're treating them, and there's a difference between treatment and cure.
Mm.
And cure to me means that there is no need for any further medical intervention.
Yep.
You are free of symptoms and you are doing something that is allowing you to live symptom free without the use of a tablet.
Mm.
If you're on a tablet, then you are in fact still in the treatment phase.
Mm.
Now, there are certain conditions we know that something so important has been removed from the body for whatever reason that treatment is needed for life.
Yeah.
For example, diabetes.
Mm.
There is no way at the moment that we can currently cure diabetes,
Type 1.
type 1 diabetes. However, we do know that type 2 diabetes can be completely cured or treated. And that treatment, if you're treating type 2 diabetes, that is likely to go on for life.
Mm.
But to cure type 2 diabetes, you need to change what you're doing in your life
Mm.
to make a difference. And that is about reteaching the body on what to do with glucose,
Yeah, and that's about
basically.
addressing those foundations, isn't it? Again, it's
Yeah,
it's it's it's
exactly.
it's removing
Yeah.
the
And
scaffolding.
that's, yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what exercise is in the significant number of mental health conditions of depression and anxiety. But you've got to convince the person that this is going to work. The data is there,
Yeah.
a huge amount of data is there to suggest that it's going to work. But it's really difficult sometimes for the patient to be motivated into getting into doing that.
Yeah.
Because they should have started the exercise. They should have started the exercise regime to prevent them getting
Mm.
depressed. Now we're depressed, and trying to stimulate yourself to get to that point is really difficult. So sometimes what I like to do is support that person. Maybe I'll support them with a tablet if needed to get them motivated enough to commence the exercise therapy. I think antidepressants should be definitely reviewed. That it's not something you should be on for life, and it's something that you should be reviewing on a regular basis and trying to take back from the patient. But exercise should work alongside it going forward.
Why do you think we're not discussing this much as doctors? I think so. For example, if I'm signing somebody off, that's a really good opportunity to get this message across, because you're
Mm.
signing them off work. You've just created some space in their week where
Mm.
potentially they could sit and ruminate and drive themselves mad. Now, that's not to say people don't need to be away from work. If it's not always that necessarily
Mm.
work is the cause of the stress. I'm
No.
not necessarily talking
Yeah.
about clinical depression here, but it can be the kind of first domino that falls. So
Yeah.
we remove work because it's one of the domains that we can control. And I'll say to people, we can't control everything, can't take you out of your family necessarily. But if we can take some of the pressure off by signing you off work, that's something that we can move. It's a lever we can pull. So therefore, you have suddenly got some space, because time to do this is something that I hear all the time from, office chatter to patients that I see in the clinic. So there's a really good opening there to say, I'm signing you off, but part of your prescription is you need to get your trainers on and you need to go for a walk. And I'm not
Mm.
talking, if 10 minutes round the block because you're socially anxious is all you can
Yeah.
manage, well,
Yeah.
fine. And you do that as many times as you can manage. But where that's not an issue, I want you to get out for 40 minutes or an hour every single day. And I
Yeah.
haven't once had anybody come back and say that made them worse. I just have never seen that in 20 years.
No.
But I'm not sure that that's a consistent message. And sometimes I think, is that because the clinician themselves hasn't experienced it? I think stuff we experience ourselves as
I think
human
you're right.
beings,
Yeah.
influences
Yeah.
how you practice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's huge.
I think
Mm.
you're absolutely right there. I think it goes back to this as well. It's really quite sad. I talk about the fact that the patient wants to feel justified of coming to see me. And I can totally understand that they've had to wait a period of time, depending on where they're trying to access a doctor. They've had to wait a period of time. It's a real effort in the current NHS to get in front of that GP.
Total ball ache.
It is total ball ache. So they want to feel justified. I've really tried hard to get here in front of you. And sadly, I think the message, when I say, well, I think actually an exercise regime is what's called for here, it sounds to the patient in some way that I am belittling their condition.
Mm.
It doesn't justify a medication. And I think it's really important that we change that and say, actually, you're too important to justify a medication on its own.
Mm.
And what's really important is that we do something really, really big here, and that is exercise. The other thing I think people think is it's a bit like saying, I think you need a holiday. And people think that
Yeah,
they think,
people think that fixes everything.
yeah, and they associate exercise as saying exactly the same. It's
Mm.
like a throwaway comment.
Yeah.
It's not a real thing. And I really try and get this across to people how important and how beneficial exercise is
Mm.
to their outcome of their mental health. It's massive.
I think, in defense of our colleagues as well, there is a lot of stuff that we have to hold in our heads, and you lean into the stuff that you're more interested in. And there will be many people who've been doing the job for 30 years and don't know that data that you quoted at the start of
Yeah,
of
yeah,
us talking. And, we can't know everything about everything, but I personally, and I'm sure you agree, see this as so fundamental to what we do and how we live as a
mm,
society, that it should be bumped up the priority list and become part of the everyday conversation. I think one of the things that's helped cement it for me, and I try and get this across if there's time, is what's going on in our brains that makes it such a reliable thing to engage in to produce predictable results. And
yeah,
we have evolved to feel better with exercise for the single reason that we wouldn't have evolved very successfully if we didn't move to find food and survive. So our
mm,
actual brain neurochemistry is wired in favor of this. So we're denying it. We're denying
mm,
something we're fundamentally evolved to do when we sit in the house Googling how to cure depression and watching things on social media thinking that will help. There was a great book that I read some time ago, so I can't quote it, but it's called Good Reasons for Bad Feelings by Randolph Ness, and he's an evolutionary medicine psychiatrist. And basically what he does is give you a very good evolutionary explanation for so many of the range of the emotions that we
yeah,
feel. And it's fascinating. A lot of it's tied
yeah,
up in fear, and the fear response will pull you away from things that potentially risk your life. So that's
Yeah,
quite a
yeah,
good survival
yeah,
mechanism.
yeah,
But equally, we release dopamine when we exercise to give us that good
yeah,
feeling so that we
yeah,
remember that and then we move and we find food and we keep surviving. Because if we remember,
yeah.
we've only evolved to reproduce. In fact, what caught my attention with that particular guy is on a podcast, that was the first thing he was asked. He said, "Why aren't we all happy?" He said, "Evolution doesn't care whether you're happy or not. Evolution just cares that you reproduce."
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's a really
Yeah,
good thing to hold in your head. So when I've got time, I will sometimes say to somebody, this is why it works, and this is why I can 100% say to you with confidence that if you do this, this is you
yeah,
will feel better. Maybe not
yeah.
amazing. You're not going to be doing backflips and cartwheels the next time you see me, but those kind of small wins can start to build and compound. And then you get into what we've talked about before about consistency and where it leads. I'm not sure everybody's interested in the proper nerdy neuroscience in which part of the
No,
brain's doing
yeah.
what. I find it fascinating, but I do.
I mean, just yeah, on that point there, just to explain that a bit more. So this, I find this absolutely fascinating. So if you do an exercise regime, which is like walking around the
Mm,
block, and you do that for a regular basis, that is what you would get from exercising at a moderate intensity 3 to 5 times a week in a 12-week program. And what you're doing there is you're going out and you're looking for seeds,
mm,
fruit, water.
mm.
You're not doing anything high intensity. And we know that we fundamentally, those are the sort of things that we would eat in the majority of our existence when we were
Yeah,
evolving. Every now and again, we'd run really, really hard and high intensity to hunt down and meet prey.
yeah, yeah,
But those hunts were not always successful.
yeah.
Just like looking for the berries and the fruit and the water wasn't always
Mm,
successful. But what the body needed you to do was enjoy it.
mm,
Because if you didn't enjoy it, you wouldn't do it again tomorrow. Even though you didn't get the
yeah.
reward of the berries and the fruit and the water, and then every now and again the big meat kill,
Mm,
the body needed you to enjoy it, to make sure you did the same thing again tomorrow,
mm,
kept going
mm,
and enjoyed that process. And that's exactly
mm,
what we see in the exercise data.
mm,
If you do moderate exercise on a regular basis,
mm,
it makes a massive difference. If you do high intensity, but less frequently, it makes a massive difference. So you're either going for the kill, the
mm,
meat kill,
mm,
or you're going for the gathering of fruits and seeds and water, etc.,
mm.
to make sure that you carry on your existence. I mean, I can't. When you say when you explain it to a patient, you can't explain it any better than that,
Yeah,
can you?
yeah,
This is what you're designed to do. You're not designed to sit in an office. You're not designed to sit and scroll
yeah.
through Instagram. You're designed to feel good about moving.
Yeah. And I think when I've heard people who've studied, that this notion that we're all depressed now, we're all miserable, we're all overweight. And there's some truth to that. If you look at the trends, most people who studied this in great depth seem to arrive back at that same conclusion, in that we are not living the way that we have designed to be living. We're not connected in communities, which is,
No,
a
yeah,
separate conversation probably for another day. And that's a much harder thing to fix if people are socially isolated. But again, coming back to this thing of you can do the basics better in order to help yourself, and we can work together on this. And I think that's probably the bit that we're not doing widely enough when we see these people at that first or second or third time, to be able to help steer them in the right direction. And there will always be people that put barriers in place. Oh, but my knee hurts and my back hurts and I haven't got time. And when you hear all those kind of barriers start
yeah.
popping up, and it's not always possible to beat down all of those barriers, but I think those precious people that really want to help themselves and are so lost in the emotion of how they're feeling and don't really know what to do next, sometimes do need those first things pointed out. And I don't know about you, but I know sometimes when I've been in the swirl of something really stressful, somebody going, right, this is what you're going to do. You're going to start here, make it really simple. This is how often you're going to walk every day, and this is what you're going to do on a Tuesday. And this sometimes actually you need that, because you just get so overwhelmed with stress. And some of the people that come to be signed off have reached that point and beyond, and some people will come earlier on. But I think actually there's no harm in setting it out as a prescription like that. And I think what was
Yeah.
interesting back in the days when it was easier to get appointments sooner than it is now, I used to find that pre-booking to see somebody when you'd seen them and they were in the throes of a really stressful part and you were worried that they might tip over and you felt that they needed to be followed up quite closely. It was surprising how many people, when you put that date in the diary and see them maybe 2 or 3 weeks later on, actually hadn't gone and collected the prescription. Something about being listened to and setting it all out and feeling heard. I mean, that's a huge thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Was enough to press
Yeah.
pause on all of that. So I think
Yeah.
we've probably lost sight now of, because we can measure the number of prescriptions prescribed, but we can't measure the number that don't get collected from the pharmacy quite so easily, or that get collected and then don't make it out of the handbag or
Yeah.
the bathroom cabinet. So it may be that actually things aren't as bleak sometimes as what we think it is
Yeah.
when we're dishing these things out. But there literally are some days in practice, I don't know about you, that you think, wow, I'm just medicating everybody, especially in other places where I've worked where this is more prevalent.
Yeah.
And it was interesting consulting over lockdown when people who were very outdoorsy suddenly lost access to all of that and the impact that had, as
Mm.
opposed to the reverse, people who suddenly weren't spending an hour in the car in the day commuting and were then doing their prescribed hour of exercise and felt much better. It was almost, I just could
Yeah.
see this transition. It was really, really fascinating experiment. Sadly, I don't know about you, but I think we've all lapsed back into how we lived
Absolutely. It's,
beforehand.
it's, it's terrible, isn't it? I
Mm,
actually was saying, actually, I think it was this morning, that, do you remember lockdown?
mm,
How gross it was. I mean, I was going out to work, and that was the downside. But actually, as all the family was together. If you remember,
mm,
the weather was fantastic. I'm incredibly lucky to where I lived, and that we've got a gym here and
mm.
everything, and so it was probably the fittest I've ever been,
Really.
and really, really enjoyed it. But you're
Mm,
right,
mm,
we've thrown that away. We had a
mm,
huge opportunity, and we've thrown that good habits
mm,
away, and it's been consumed again by that stress of life and
mm,
and work.
mm,
But going back to just a little thing you said there about people being heard, the other thing that I find is that we can't do now, which is a shame, is that when you say to patients, "And I'll see you again in 2 weeks' time,"
mm,
because it gave them that safety net, and
mm,
that's been eroded away now. So we don't have that ability to say,
mm,
am I hearing you?
mm,
We're going to try this, and I promise you that we're going to walk this walk together.
mm,
And if it's not working, I'll see you in 2 weeks,
mm,
and then I'll see you in 4 weeks, so that they felt they always had something. But I think now patients feel, once they get in front of you, they must validate what they're having said,
yeah.
because they feel like, well, I'm never going to get to see this doctor again.
Mm.
If I do see a doctor, it won't be the same doctor,
And it probably won't
and
be, given the way things
probably
are.
won't
Yeah.
be. And yeah, absolutely. And like I say, they want
Mm,
to be justified. They want me to hear it, and they want me to give them something, because of this one-stop shop, which is really sad. And I think we've got to change the way we educate the next generation coming through, and get them to understand
mm,
how important exercise is, not
mm,
erode exercise that we're doing in education at the moment,
mm,
and not having PE teachers, not having a lot of exercise built into the curriculum,
mm,
but actually removing it.
mm,
That we should be putting more and more in,
mm,
and removing other things rather than that. And I think that would change the way society is. There are lots of things in the curriculum that I watch my youngsters do, and I
mm.
think, well, how's that going to help you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I know
Mm,
exercise is going to help you. And I think we definitely live in a, this is getting very political now, but I think we definitely live in a two-tier educational system, where kids that go to private schools get a better physical education
mm,
than they do in the state system, and which is incredibly sad.
mm,
The state should realise the importance of exercise and be really pushing that forward, because they've got a broken NHS. They've got to do something,
mm.
and in my mind, the NHS is unfixable. We've got to change what's happening in the future.
Yeah, there was something I was reading last week. I can't remember what it was on the back of, but it was talking about this issue of PE. The person who'd written the article was talking about how PE can make or break somebody's attitude towards exercise for life. And I know my daughter's school, she's a teenager, she's 15, there was an initiative 2 years ago to try and get girls at that age more interested in sport, because it's a real problem that girls drop off altogether in terms of physical activity once they hit those teen years. And I was thinking about back to PE and what it does, and how it, if you're naturally quite sporty and quite good, you'll be fine. There'll be opportunities. But what we're not doing is missing those opportunities to educate teenagers about just activity for activity's sake. It doesn't have to be competitive. You don't have to join the hockey club or football club. And we're kind of streamlining them to almost turn themselves off it. Not all of them, but some of them off it. And then it's so much harder to get back into it. And I probably noticed this more in girls than I do in boys, but it is so much more of a difficult sell, and they're so much more likely to struggle with weight gain and body image
Yeah.
issues, and not see exercise as anything other than what you've been made to do in PE on a freezing cold day.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's some girls that love doing rugby and football, but there's lots of girls that are now made to do that. And I'm probably saying this more because I know my daughter's had, issues with having to do that. And I think, gosh, she's never going to do this again after school. What
Yeah.
a missed opportunity to actually provide variety. And there's no shortage of
Mm.
sport educated, sport interested people that could put things on. I do think it's a real problem. In the meantime, when they're not exercising, they're wandering into the co-op and buying crap and energy drinks and stuff before they've even got on the bus in the morning.
I've got a young client. She's 19, and she is exactly what you just described. She hated doing sport at school. She didn't really embrace it in any way. She did a Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award, but didn't carry it on, didn't really enjoy that, and then left school and went to university and started the whole drink,
Oh,
joy in life,
yeah.
and packed on loads of weight. And then she came to me and she said, "Well, I just feel awful. My skin's shot. I just feel sluggish. Just feel like my life isn't going where I want to go. And I want to do something for a close friend of mine died. I want to do something for charity. What can I do?" And I said, "Well, you can do anything you want. Why don't we start at something like the London Marathon?" So
You really got the low hanging fruit there.
yeah. So she's done the London Marathon. She swam yesterday. She swam Serpentine, which is a 2 mile swim in Hyde Park.
Oh, wow.
And she'll go on to do Ride London, and that'll be the London Triple.
Yeah.
And her whole body image has changed. She's sacked the drinking. She is just enthused by life. It's amazing to see. And the other thing is, when she first came to me, I'm sure she won't mind me saying this, but running was a challenge. She was running 11-minute miles, which is not a slow run, but it's certainly not a quick run. And she was running 11-minute miles, and the progression has been amazing. She's down to sub 9-minute miles now. So I think as long as she continues on this journey, it will make a huge benefit to her life and a huge benefit to her career as she starts off in life when she finishes university. But she hadn't been afforded that when she was at school, and that's the real sad thing. Imagine if we'd started with her when she was 14. Where would we be now? How much opportunity are we missing from the younger generation by not intervening early enough with exercise?
When we know the data says they're getting more anxious and
Yes.
struggling with school attendance. What struck out to me with the story of your client is she had to feel awful first. And that's always the bit that I'm looking for with people. What's the pain point that's driving you to change? Because otherwise, stuff always stays on the to-do list unless you
Yes.
really get to what is the pain point. So she had to feel awful first. And if I remember being back to my teens and my 20s, you feel all right most of the time. You can drink what you want, sleep on a washing line, and still drag yourself into work the next day. That all changes in the next decade. And maybe that's part of the issue with teenagers. It is that they don't feel physically bad for not exercising, because why would you? You're in your physical prime. But maybe using this, I don't know if teenagers would respond to data, but they do know when they feel anxious. Jesus, I see loads of them in clinic feeling really anxious and not knowing what to do about it, and stuck in this cycle of panic and anxiety and running between friends to try and fix it. And maybe that should be the avenue. I don't know. Maybe we need to approach the education secretary and go, look, here's the pain point that we've got with all these teenagers, and actually you're missing the trick. Don't send them to CAMS, who will never get round to seeing them. That's the Child
No,
and Adolescent Mental Health Services. Send them to an exercise group that they enjoy, that's not competitive. They're not comparing their bodies. They're just actually doing it because they enjoy it.
well, this is. I'm going to put this out now. If the Education Health Secretary happens to be listening, I am willing to offer a 12-week free program
Yeah.
to show you the difference that 12 weeks can make.
Yeah.
Imagine what that would do if you started that within your curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, and I don't know if you ever think this, I don't watch the news very often. It's not good for my mental health. But whenever I do, I look at, the physical condition of a lot of the leaders we have in the House of Commons, and I think, okay, you're standing up there talking about the state of the NHS or the state of various different things, and you are that person who's sitting all day and over consuming, and that's very judgmental, I know, but I'm sorry, we are naturally judgmental creatures.
I think sadly, it's not just the politicians, is it? If you look at the providers of healthcare,
Yeah, yeah,
we're not the best, we're not the fittest bunch, are we?
yeah.
I think it's really difficult to be told, I think you should do some exercise. If somebody sitting in front of you is significantly
Yeah.
obese and isn't looking after themselves. Now, that I totally understand my colleagues who are under huge amounts of stress in life and working incredibly hard, for them to, that's the classic, I just haven't got time. But it's about making time to make sure you're still sitting in the chair in 10 years'
Yeah.
time. Because if you don't get out that chair on a regular basis, you won't be sitting in that chair at all.
Yeah.
Because something bad will have happened to you.
And also, I think, however you intellectualize this, we are subconsciously making judgments all the time based on what we see. It's a very well developed evolutionary system again. And so people will take the message more seriously from somebody who looks like they walk the walk. I mean, ultimately, that's what the fitness industry runs upon. The most
Yeah,
successful trainers are not sitting there. They might have the best knowledge, but if they're not looking like they walk the walk, they're not gonna sell what they're selling, I think. But I used to think that when I was a kid, I used to look at high level athletes with an old grey haired coach. And, I was a fan of the Rocky films, and I used to think,
yeah,
how
yeah,
can
yeah,
Mickey be
yeah,
that coach when he's so old? He can't do what Rocky does. And it is, you're making those judgments even then as a young kid watching something, thinking,
yeah,
surely that person needs to be even fitter and even better at that thing to be able to kind of convey that message. And, I can understand it better now at the age that I'm at. But I
yeah.
think in the consulting room, you've got these little short windows to get into people.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about there is you're talking about the difference between being a personal trainer and a performance coach. And a performance coach doesn't necessarily, that's something that's completely different in sport. Being a performance
yeah.
coach is about looking for the marginal gains and understanding the science behind it. You don't, most trainers from all sports, most coaches from all sports at high level haven't actually done
Yeah.
the sport to that level themselves. But that what they are is very good at analysing what the athlete is doing in front of them and how to make it better. Whereas we're talking at a personal trainer level where we're just trying to get people motivated to move
Yeah.
and make a difference. No, like I've said, I don't imagine any of my athletes, apart from one, will go on, maybe two, will go on to become world beating athletes. I think the vast majority, which is the same throughout life, the vast majority are just doing it for enjoyment and to get the benefits from what exercise
Yeah,
provides.
and I think with any of my clients, I don't profess to be, I'm not a powerlifter, I'm not a competitive athlete in any way. My message is you need to do this to get yourself in the best position to keep in the game, to be able to stay active, to keep living in as best as you can in a dose that works. And so yeah, I'm selling a version that I know I can do and I know I can work into all the, various things that I have to juggle. I'm not a high performance coach by any means, but I think you don't need to be. You don't need to be to get your basics done well. It's the same with diet, which we should definitely talk about diet on another day because it
Yeah,
always gets people's opinions flowing left, right, and center, I find. But it's the same thing. You don't need to do it perfectly. Most of your results will come from the basics that you're doing most of the time. I think sometimes if you see a patient and they suspect that you are too much into your thing or too fanatical, and there's definitely a few fanatical cycling GPs that I meet along the way quite often, they might be put off. So
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think
Yeah.
it is that
Yeah.
thing. Oh well, it's, oh yeah, but you're really into this, and suddenly there's a barrier goes up as to why I can't do this. So it's getting that message right that actually you don't need to ever do a 5 hour cycle. You never need to get there. That's
No.
fine, but you need to do more than what you're doing now. And these are the reasons why. And here's the dose and the prescription, which I
Yeah,
believe is going to work
absolutely.
for you to feel the benefit. What?
And it's the consistency that makes a difference.
Mm,
Talking of which, as we come to the end of this
mm.
podcast,
I know
so
what you're
I'm
going to
at
say.
220. I'm at 226
Congratulations.
on my hanging bar challenge that
Wow.
you gave to
Yeah.
me. Where are
No,
you?
dreadful. I've had one access to the rower, but in my defence, I would like to defer this because I haven't been
Right.
able to get to the studio where the rower is.
Okay.
Apart from that first time, which yes, I wanted to puke. I had no idea what to expect from it, and I don't row. I've now learned there's a bit of a technique to rowing,
Yeah.
which I would like to get on and practice again. But given the last few weeks having been quite chaotic with some stuff that's gone on, I haven't got back there, but I'm due to be back there as normal in the next fortnight or so. So I will report back. I feel I need
Good.
to
You
improve
do it.
on
Yeah.
that baseline time it was nine something. I can't remember what
Right.
the digits were.
I think that's
Mm.
I think that's a good start time. That's a
Mm.
good start to be
Yeah.
that's but it's rowing is a incredible exercise, and the benefits you can get from rowing for relatively little amount of time put in is astronomical. So I would thoroughly encourage you to go back, and after doing, I told you about what to do with your
Yep.
barbell rows
Yep.
and increasing your lat strength and also your squats to increase your power in your legs. But if you YouTube, this is always
Rabbit hole incoming. Yeah.
if you YouTube the British Olympic swimming team, and it was what's his name? No, not who's the big rower?
Redgrave.
Yeah, Steve Redgrave. So Steve Redgrave on a concept rower,
Okay.
and you will then see the absolute limit at which you can push the body to.
Right.
And this was when when they first realised that he was a diabetic.
Okay.
But if you look at all of them, that's why they could win gold. It was that their ability to go to that very dark place on the rower on the 2,000 meter
Right.
challenge.
I can see that I went to a dark place.
Yeah, yeah,
Couldn't
yeah.
speak too much afterwards. I was doing it in the presence of a very accomplished coach who was yelling
Right,
at me technique things, which took a while to sink in. It's interesting, isn't it?
right.
When you're doing something really hard, how you can really only hold one thing in your head. I'll often say
Yeah,
this to people when I'm coaching them and their squats getting heavy. You will really only be able to hold one cue in your head. And so you have to, as a coach, give them what is the primary thing to hold in to try and keep that squat moving forward. Because you might be thinking, right, knees out, squat into your heels, keep your back angle rigid, but they'll all go out the window apart from
yeah.
one. So you have to
One,
decide
one
which is the
thing.
primary lever. So
Really.
yeah, so the
Yeah.
few things that she was yelling at me with the rower didn't land. I need more practice at it. But I am determined. I'm determined to see some improvement in that.
Okay.
And as somebody who has no experience with rowing, it's interesting. Yeah, it's good to challenge yourself. So yeah,
Yes, it is.
we'll
It is.
just defer
So
that.
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to try and get to the 3 minutes
Mm,
on the hang. I have to say it's incredibly hard.
yeah.
I didn't think it would be. For some reason, I didn't think it would be that hard.
Mm,
It's my body weight. How hard can it be?
mm.
I have to say it really hurts. It is not just on the day, but the day after and the day after that. But it is, again, there's a lot of technique. There is a lot of technique in it, but I can see the progression, and I love things that you can measure like that. And it's only well, 2 minutes, 2 hours, 2 minutes, 26 out of my day.
Yeah. It's where your mind goes though, isn't it? Because you're just hanging there and so you're
Yeah,
fighting with yourself I've had enough, I've
Yeah.
enough. Can I do it? Can I do it? So I found when I think best I got was 205, but I had to just think about something else. And so,
Yeah.
my husband wandered in and we were talking, and I think had he not wandered in and I was talking about something different, I might have just given out. Been some really interesting research, and the guy who did it is somebody called Tim, and I came across him in the low carb world, but he's done some really interesting research to show that it's always the brain that decides when you're done. Your body could carry on much longer, which I think is
Oh,
fascinating.
absolutely.
Yeah. Got
Absolutely.
his
Yeah.
surname. What good stuff.
But yeah, in the endurance world, that's
Mm,
so true. Like I say, I am absolutely convinced that anyone can do an Ironman
mm,
with a relatively less than a year's training.
mm,
And I always say, you can do a marathon, etc., because it is. I believe anyone can go out now, anyone at all, apart from if they've got a serious physical disorder, they or disability, they can go out and do 10 miles straight off the bat.
mm.
What stops you is your
Yeah,
head.
yeah.
And and I know that from
Mm,
my own head.
mm,
I know how that feels, but it's your body is designed to do it.
mm.
Going back to that evolutionary
Yeah,
aspect, we're designed to do 10 miles,
yeah,
boom.
yeah, yeah.
Not fast,
Mm,
but 10 miles.
yeah. And, you would if somebody had a gun at your head, wouldn't you? That's the thing.
Yeah,
"Oh, I
absolutely.
can't
You
do
would think
this."
about it, would you?
Well, you would if I put a gun to you or
Yeah.
your kid's head.
You
Mm.
never see, sadly, you never see people, refugees moving from a country going, oh, a bit far.
Yeah, I'm a bit knackered actually. I'll just stop here and
Yeah, I'll
give
just
up.
stop here. Oh, it's a bit painful. I'll
Yeah,
just have a bit of a. No, you don't, do you?
yeah,
Bless them. And
absolutely.
that, that's the reality of it
Mm,
is our brains that stop us.
yeah, yeah.
But anyway,
Our brains need
until
to
next
stop us
time.
now. Yes.
Yeah. So next time, what are we going to talk about?
I did
I really
go on.
go on. I really want to get into the world of talking about hormone
Okay,
replacements.
let's do that next then. But yeah, hormones. We could do a male hormone episode and a female one separately because I think there's enough material in both.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I suspect you'll have more opinions on the male side of things and
Yeah.
vice versa. So yeah,
Yes.
okay. We'll do that next time.
Let's do this. So should we do female first then?
Can do because I won't need to do too much preparation for it, given that it's the bread and
Okay,
butter
do female
of what
first
I'm
because
doing.
I think that really comes easy off the back of that
Mm,
for doing
yeah.
males.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
See you next time.